Hi everybody, I'm Sandra, and this is the story on how my sister-in-law caused my miscarriage, but later on faced several consequences and regretted her actions. Let me just give you a rundown of everything that happened. I've been happily married to my husband for about 12 years, and his name is Nolan. I met Nolan in our senior year of high school, and ever since then, we've been practically inseparable. Nolan had a younger sister who was 3 years younger than us. Her name was Amelia. Amelia was super cool with me at first, but I could already tell from the first time that I'd met her that she wasn't actually happy about me. I wasn't quite sure why it seemed like she was like that, but I shrugged it off and forgot about it for a while. Soon, Nolan and I had graduated from high school. We spent the entire summer hanging out. We went on camping trips together, attended sports games, and we'd sometimes part so we could hang out with our individual friends. On rare occasions, we were forced to hang out with Amelia and her friends, aka babysitting. And although having to watch over Nolan's sister and friends was a little awkward, we still managed to make it a very fun experience. But as fall started, we went off to college. Unfortunately for the both of us, we attended colleges that were a little far away. And by far away, I mean almost across the country. But we were going to focus on our education above everything else. So in the effort to graduate successfully to eventually find a good job, Nolan and I stopped talking as much to get our studies done. I will be honest when I say that I was quite lonely for the years that I was at school, but before I knew it, I had graduated. It was finally time to go home, and I just couldn't wait to meet up with my boyfriend again after all these years. I soon bought a plane ticket and moved back to my hometown after packing all of my items. When I got home, I was pleasantly surprised by Nolan, who had arrived in town earlier than I did. I was ecstatic to be reunited with the love of my life. We decided to both see if we could find jobs around our families so they could be closer to us, and luckily, we found several. I was successfully able to find a job as a physical therapist, while Nolan became a web developer. Since his job was technology-related, Nolan worked from home, which was nice. Meanwhile, I went to the therapy center 4 times a week to work. We decided not to move in together yet, until we had accumulated a good amount of money, and were certain that we wanted to invest into a home together. And since we lived with our individual parents, Nolan and I were very close physically wise, and could see each other practically every day. One day, Nolan's mom Carly walked in on the two of us cuddling. She was wearing a very nice dress and had a purse in her arm.
Nolan, your father and I will be out of town for about 2 weeks. We both have business that we need to attend to, so we need to travel internationally. Your sister still can't drive yet, so I am asking you to please drive her and her friends whenever she needs it.
Sure, Mom.
Thank you.
Amelia still hadn't gotten her license yet for whatever reason, so her parents still drove her around to places. But because her and Nolan's parents were out of town now, driving her would be mine or Nolan's responsibility. However, whenever Amelia and her friends needed a ride, they'd demand that Nolan take them, even when he was doing something very important for his work. I didn't think much of this because Nolan was her brother after all, but I didn't realize that the situation was going to spiral and become worse. It was very rare for Amelia to ask me to drive her. And whenever she did, she'd say some really strange things.
So, I was going through Nolan's room and found a red lipstick in his closet.
And? I think that's my lipstick. I must have left it by accident.
You sure he's not, seeing someone else?
What? What led you to that conclusion? Amelia was saying some weird stuff, and it was obvious that she was trying to prompt some thoughts in my head. I was very sure that the lipstick was mine, and that Amelia was just saying that for some weird reason. I didn't want to tell Nolan about it because I didn't want to start any drama between his family. Finally, Nolan and I decided that it was time to move in together. We found a pretty house that was about 30 minutes away from our homes. It was a good location since I was closer to work, but we were also close to family. Not long after this, Nolan proposed to me. I was so happy. We went from high school sweethearts to actually getting married now. Pretty soon, our family and friends found out and were all ecstatic, just like us. However, Amelia gave a fake smile that I noticed immediately, but everyone else didn't. Again, I decided to ignore her. She wasn't outwardly saying or doing anything to me, so I wasn't too concerned with her. Nolan and I had our wedding just a couple months after we were engaged. The ceremony was beautiful, and I could tell that I was going to be with Nolan for a long time. Amelia was one of my bridesmaids, and even though I caught a few sour glances from her, we had a fun time. Shortly after the wedding, I got pregnant, and Nolan and I have never been happier, especially since I'd been told by doctors that I had a low chance of getting pregnant. It was finally time to make a family of our own. Again, just like our engagement, everyone was excited for us to welcome our kid. And again, Amelia had this strange attitude about her that I couldn't quite lay my finger on. But this time, she was worse.
Do you ever think that you and Nolan jumped into this a little too quickly?
No. Why?
It's just that, it's a little unfair how you immediately just got into a relationship with my brother. There were so many prettier girls swooning for him before, but you basically just skipped the whole line.
Huh? What the hell was Amelia talking about? It absolutely made zero logical sense that Nolan has to go through a long list of his secret admirers first before dating me. I started to ask her for her logic on that, and to voice my own opinions, but Amelia suddenly walked away from the room. Well, she's upset, but I'll just let her be. 2 months had passed after I found out that I was pregnant. Nolan's parents invited Nolan and I over for dinner. We agreed happily, and Carly even revealed that Amelia and her best friend had helped prepare the dinner and were going to be at the home for dinner. I was a bit surprised that Amelia's best friend would be at dinner with us, but I didn't mind too much. At Nolan's parents' home, we were served some delicious food as well as juice. Nolan's parents talked to Nolan and me about what we were planning on naming the baby, how we were going to set up a routine so that we could both take care of it. We also took a lot of advice from Carly and her husband Jack, which was nice. Nolan and I thanked the family for welcoming us to such a nice dinner and then went home. A few more days went by and I started noticing strange things. Suddenly, I stopped having morning sickness. This was really weird since I've had the worst nausea in my entire life just the day before. As I went on through the day, I experienced even stranger things. My back started hurting painfully and there was blood in my underwear. What the hell? Why was I bleeding all of a sudden? I told my coworker what was happening, and she explained that I might be having a miscarriage. In a panic, I called my husband to ask him to book an appointment with my gynecologist. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening. Nolan picked me up from work early and we rushed to the healthcare center. Rushing inside, we found out from the doctor that I was going through a miscarriage. I was completely devastated at this news that I started bawling in front of both the gynecologist and Nolan. How could this have happened? Nolan quickly told his parents, who were both just as upset as I was. My family and friends found out too and tried hard to console me, but I'd just lost a baby. A baby I'd been told that would be very hard for me to conceive. This would have been the brightest gem in my life, the most priceless soul. But it didn't make it, and I didn't understand why. Nolan's parents started talking about my lost child excessively. They would talk about it over social media, with their friends and their coworkers. I think that they were just as saddened by this news, if not more. But it was a good thing that they obsessed over this. Because Carly and Jack talked about this not only online but in real life, Amelia quickly cracked under the pressure. She admitted to Nolan that she and her friend had actually given me piña colada with alcohol, even after promising that nothing in the drink had alcohol at all during dinner. And since I had a high risk of miscarrying, a few cups of the juice had caused me to miscarry. I couldn't believe it. It was my own sister-in-law that had killed my unborn baby. Amelia begged Nolan not to say anything to admit that it was just an unfortunate incident, but Nolan obviously told his parents. Carly and Jack were absolutely outraged. They began to scream at Amelia and her friend on how they were horrible humans for doing that to me. I told my parents the whole story of what happened as well, and they were very angered. As more and more people found out what had happened to me, and the true story behind it, Amelia also revealed more to me and Nolan. She decided to show up at our door one day out of nowhere.
Well, fine. Michaela has liked you since we were 13, but when you started to date Sandra, she got super jealous. She hasn't let go of you for years. So we decided to kill your baby to see if your relationship could fall apart so that Michaela would date you instead.
Amelia, are you actually insane?
That's so cruel of you! What the hell is wrong with you?
I'm telling Mom and Dad.
No, please don't. You guys can just make another baby. Michaela and I are really sorry about this.
We don't give a flying shit if you're sorry. Our baby is dead, Amelia, and this is all because of your infatuated little friend. Don't you know that it's hard for Sandra to conceive? That might have been our only chance, but you decided to be greedy and try to change the world for yourself.
I watched with teary eyes as Nolan shut the door in her face before he called his parents. From then on, I hadn't really seen Amelia much. I did hear that she's gotten quite infamous on Facebook due to Carly and Jack's love of oversharing on their social media. Nolan told me that his parents forbade her from ever getting near me again. I also hear that the number of friends she had has declined. Most of them were scared that she'd do the same to them. As for me, Nolan and I tried again and we were very lucky. I found out that I was pregnant with twins, and after a painful and long pregnancy, I gave birth to the most beautiful angels ever. Now at 36, I'm living my best life with my kids and a loving husband. Amelia's best friend also ended up marrying a different man, so all of that effort to hurt me really wasn't worth it. Carly and Jack had also cut off a lot of the financial access they let Amelia have, and then she had to find a job as well. Amelia is now married to a postman, and she has been trying for a baby for years now to no avail. Nolan believes that they could have gone harsher on his little sister. What do you think? Thanks for listening to my story. My name is Livia, and I inherited my house from my parents. They both passed away from medical conditions. I've also suffered from chronic fatigue since I was a child. I started working freelance jobs where I could embrace my artist hobbies and make my own hours to manage my condition. Once I got a sweet request from a man named Rolf for a portrait of his family for his mother's birthday. Rolf lived near me, and after I finished the portrait, he kept in touch. Soon, Rolf and I got married, and he moved in with me. I still took freelance jobs as supplemental income, but Rolf worked full-time. After a year, Rolf got angry that I couldn't get out of bed on difficult days.
You don't have to be so lazy. There's no reason you can't work on jobs or chores. It seems like you wait until I get home to start anything, which means everything is dirty when I come home. I'm your husband, but you make me do all the housework.
My bad days.
I'm the one that has a real job. You just do art projects, and you're a messy slob.
Rolf had changed since we'd been married. He refused to do any housework because I stayed home, even if I did have jobs. There wasn't any concern from him about my condition, and his negativity made my fatigue worse, which made him angry and my condition even worse. We're not struggling financially. You could work part-time and help around the house? My fatigue gets bad when I overexert myself.
Maybe you're just an unhealthy pig. If you had a better diet and cooked for us, you wouldn't feel bad.
A change in diet might help, but it wasn't the cause of the problem. Couldn't he understand that I wasn't able to make food sometimes? On bad days, I often wouldn't eat anything.
I'm not going to work part-time. To be a respectable man, I need to work full-time so I can move up in the corporation.
But we're not poor.
Money is everything, dear. Surely you understand that since it funds your silly art projects.
Silly? You commissioned a portrait. Your mom loves it.
I never cared for art. It's pretty, but lacks substance. Like you, actually.
That argument sapped all my energy, and the next week I struggled more than usual. One day, Rolf came home excited about a promotion he'd gotten, and I was excited for him.
This promotion will be great for us. One day we'll move out of this junky old house.
There's no problem with my parents' house. I mean, some things could be updated to be more modern, but it's fine.
No problems? There's no space to entertain, and if I'm going to move up the corporate ladder, I'm going to host parties, and we'll need space for children. Actually, we should get started on those kids.
It was hard to say no to that. He was so excited about his promotion, and we'd always wanted kids. Even though I was fatigued often, I pushed myself to make sure that Rolf was in a good mood when he came home so that he'd want to try for a baby. The good feeling couldn't last. Before I knew it, I was sick and nauseous all the time. When I was sure I was pregnant, I told Rolf.
That's great, dear, but you have to take care of yourself better if you want this baby.
Maybe you could help with the housework so I wasn't overworking myself all the time? I'd appreciate it.
Overwork yourself? Ha ha ha. You don't do anything. You just lay here all day.
I guess. But housework adds stress, and that's not good for a baby.
Then just get rid of it. It was a stupid idea. I don't want to have a baby with you until we're in a better house. Go get an abortion, if you can even get out of bed to make the appointment.
What a bastard. I refused to get an abortion. We'd always wanted kids, and surely he was just trying to upset me. A few days later, Rolf told me about more exciting news.
I'm bringing you to a work party. They were so excited when I told them about my pregnant wife.
I couldn't think of anything worse than going to a party with my fatigue and pregnant nausea. but I agreed. I was just thankful it seemed he'd changed his mind about the abortion. The next day, we to the office party. The party was being hosted at the department head's large second home. This house was absolutely huge.
See, this is the house we'd have if you weren't such a sentimental brat about your parents' house. Look at it.
It's nice.
We're not hanging out with these common workers on the ground floor. This year, I've been invited to hang out with the higher-ups on the top floor.
Rolf led me through the house. The party was loud, and the flashing lights made my nausea worse. Once we were upstairs, a bunch of Rolf's co-workers began introducing themselves to me all at once. I felt boxed in and claustrophobic.
And I heard about the baby. So exciting.
Aren't you proud that Rolf is inner circle now?
Eventually, they left us alone, and I voiced my discomfort to Rolf. I'm not feeling well.
You never are. Get over it. You're not even doing anything except hanging on my arm so I can show you off. Oh, I have to introduce you to the CEO. He's my boss's boss.
Then a large, intimidating man walked over to us. It seemed this social event wasn't fun for him, and that he was really here to keep his workers in line. He was so tall and towered over me, so I had to look up at him. It just made my stomach twist.
So, this is the wife? Nice to meet you, my name is...
I couldn't even listen to him give his name because just then I couldn't hold in the urge to vomit. The bile got all over my dress that Rolf had bought new, and all over the CEO's expensive suit that he clearly wore as an intimidation tactic. There was nothing more mortifying, so I ran out of there. I sat alone for 20 minutes before realizing that Rolf wasn't going to come check on me at all and that he was probably still trying to suck up to his bosses. I called a rideshare to get me home that night. Just as I got to sleep, I was woken up by the front door slamming and Rolf yelling,
You just had to embarrass me like that. You're just lucky I wasn't fired, you bitch. I blamed it on the baby, but even then they gave me hell. You've always been lazy and good for nothing. I want a divorce.
You want a divorce? You've got it. Get me the papers to sign, and until then, you're living with your mother because this is my house. It felt good to yell back for once, and Rolf did eventually leave to go live with his mother after screaming at me once more. He got the divorce papers a few days later, but he made his mother bring them over. Mrs. David, come inside.
Dearest, please, just Maria. Mr. David's been gone a while. I'm sorry for the bad news, but these are the divorce papers.
I invited Maria inside while I signed the papers, but we started talking and I told her about the arguments and Rolf's suggestion for an abortion.
That's horrible, dearest. For what it's worth, I love your art and think you should do galleries to get your name out there.
My work isn't that good, and I won't have time for art with a baby and fatigue.
Right. Well, Rolf is no longer my son. I'll give him these papers, but then he's out of my house.
Maria did kick Rolf out of her home and also disowned him so that he wouldn't inherit anything from her. The divorce finalized, and Rolf begged me to get an abortion so he wouldn't have to pay child support. I refused. Maria was as kind and supportive as I expected Rolf to be when I'd married him. She cared for me during the pregnancy and supported my art. With her help, I got my art in a few galleries and made decent money from it. Rolf's CEO showed up to one of the galleries and asked about me, so I explained the hell Rolf had put me through. Then he bought my painting for more than the asking price and promised to give Rolf hell. With the money, I updated my home to have room for a child. One night, Maria and I were having dinner together, something she'd made. She updated me on Rolf.
He called me, sobbing. His CEO made some changes to the company and Rolf was going to have an entry-level position. Rolf refused as a bluff, and it failed, so now he's jobless.
I was happy to hear that. Rolf deserved it. After our discussion about Rolf, things were different at dinner that night.
I don't want this to come out wrong, but I've really enjoyed spending time with you, Livia. I know you're freshly divorced, and it's my son's fault, but if you were interested in dating again, I think Martin loves you.
I hadn't expected that. Martin was Rolf's younger brother, and he was so caring. He will often check on me with Maria and sometimes even send me flowers. I didn't think much of it at the time. I thought he was just being nice and trying to console me as I was freshly divorced, but apparently he had told his mom he loves me. I should put myself out there again and try dating. No one ever supported my art or believed in me like her and Martin, so I trusted her judgment with her other son. I said yes. Months later, the baby was born, and Rolf had to start paying child support. He was hopping around part-time jobs and shared a cramped apartment with 3 men. By the time Rolf's brother and I had our wedding, we lived in my own and expanded it into a gallery. The last I heard from Rolf, outside of child support payments, he'd been whoring himself out to one of his roommates. My life was great and revenge was sweet. Thanks for watching.
Now you listen to me. He is my son. He loves me. I will not allow you to stop me from seeing my only child.
If you don't leave now, I'll call the police.
I'd like to see you try.
Ethel charged at me with the knife, but Thomas swept in, shoving her away from me. She hit her head against the wall and collapsed on the ground. My name is Kirsten, and I'm a data analyst. My husband is Thomas. We've been married for almost 4 years now. He means everything to me. Between my job and my spouse, I'd never been happier in all my life. But my marriage was almost ruined the day my mother-in-law, Ethel, came to visit. I thought nothing of it at first. My husband had been feeling low the past few weeks, and Ethel decided to come over to cheer him up. I knew my husband was close to his mom, so I thought it was a great idea. When Ethel arrived, I greeted her but said I wouldn't be able to stay long because I needed to work. My day at work was uneventful for the most part, but I couldn't wait to get back home to my husband. I was excited because it was Friday, and every Friday night, my husband and I microwave popcorn and watch movies until we fall asleep. But when I arrived home, I noticed the house was unusually quiet, and there were clothes scattered across the floor. I thought nothing of it at first, but I couldn't deny that something felt wrong. I heard noise coming from the bedroom, creaking and moaning. In hindsight, I should have known what was happening, but I had no reason to believe something so horrid could ever happen. When I walked into the bedroom, Thomas and Ethel were nude, wrapped in each other's arms underneath the bedsheets. My heart sank to my stomach, and I could only scream, alerting the both of them to my presence. Thomas and Ethel both leapt out of the bed, their bodies covered in sweat. I averted my eyes and tried to ignore the nausea roiling in my stomach. Thomas was speaking, and so was Ethel, but I couldn't hear them over the ringing in my ears. There was no way it could be true, I thought. Surely I was having a nightmare. But the nightmare was real. My husband was sleeping with his own mother. I sprinted to the bathroom and vomited into the toilet, unable to shake the horrific image from my mind. Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out! Ethel ran from the house, picking her clothes up from the floor as she went, taking mine and my husband's bedsheets with her, wrapped around her naked body. I wanted to scream for my husband to leave too, but the tears came before I could stop them. I sobbed, curled in the corner of the bathroom, hoping, wishing that somehow I would wake up and find out none of this had happened. The next few hours passed by in a blur. Thomas tried speaking to me more than once, but I could barely hear him. All I could do was cry and sob and vomit. When my mind and body caught up with each other, I managed to stumble out of the bathroom and into the kitchen, where Thomas lay waiting. He handed me a glass of water, and I drank silently, thinking through my words before I could say them. Why? Why would you do this to me?
I don't know. I really don't.
What do you mean you don't know, Thomas? How can you not know why you're sleeping with your own mother, for God's sake?
I just don't know, okay?
Don't yell at me. You're sick. The both of you are sick. I want a divorce.
No, please don't. It's not like that.
Then what is it like, Thomas? Tell me. What is it like?
I said I don't know, okay? This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen.
Thomas's eyes welled with tears and he began to sob, gripping his hair as he slid down the wall and to the floor. I froze, shaken up by the sight before me. I had seen this kind of behavior before in only one other person. My best friend, Caitlin, years ago when she'd finally told me about, "Oh no, Thomas, what happened?"
I don't know, Kirsten. I just don't know. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I stood from the table and kneeled in front of him, reaching my hand out to touch his shoulder. But before I could make contact, he flinched. "Thomas, how long has this been going on?" He sniffled, composing himself just long enough to speak, his voice a shaky whimper.
A long time.
I didn't know what to say. I didn't know of any way I could comfort him. Rage flooded my chest with each pound of my heart against my ribcage. How could someone do something so horrible? I wanted to march down to wherever Ethel was and tear her apart for what she'd done. But all I could do now was stand by my husband and try to understand. "Thomas, please tell me. Did you want to do what you did? Thomas didn't move, didn't speak. Thomas, tell me. After a long moment, he shook his head no. I sighed, almost relieved that he hadn't wanted to cheat on me in this way, then disgusted with my relief, as I would have rather he just cheated on me than have to suffer what Ethel had put him through. Thomas, you can't keep doing this. She has no power over you anymore. You're an adult. You have me, your friends. Why are you still doing it? Why?
She told me it would make me feel better, that I wouldn't be so sad anymore.
Today? He shook his head again.
The first time it happened.
Oh, God.
Every time I was upset, she would want to do what we do. And I did because I thought I was supposed to.
But why do you still do it now?
I wish I could tell you, Kirsten. I really do. I've done it for so long now. It's all I know. And I'm scared.
Of what? He didn't answer, just continued sniffling and wiping the tears from his cheeks. Honey, you need to press charges. What she's doing is wrong.
She's not a bad person. She just couldn't take it when Dad died. She couldn't handle the loss, and I couldn't either. What we did was a way to cope with that. It's not her fault.
White hot rage burned beneath my skin. It is her fault. She took advantage of you. She's still taking advantage of you. He started crying again, and I softened the edge that had appeared in my tone. Sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. Thomas went silent, curled in a ball against the wall. I could think of no other words to say, no other questions to ask. So, I just sat in silence with him, letting him know I was there with him, that I wouldn't leave him no matter what. When Thomas started nodding off to sleep, I urged him to go to the guest room and get some sleep. He did so wordlessly, and I was left alone to my own thoughts. I sat at the kitchen and finished my water from earlier, my mind racing. I had no idea how to help my husband who I'd been furious at mere hours ago. I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, encourage him to take action against his mother, but I couldn't. I'd made that mistake before with Caitlin. I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I called the one person that could possibly understand, that could give me advice on how to help. I took out my phone and dialed my best friend's number.
Hello?
I gulped. It felt wrong to tell anyone else about what happened, especially with this new information. But if anyone would understand, it would be Caitlin. And I needed all the help I could get. Hey, Kate, I have something to tell you, but you can't tell anyone else. I told her everything, crying more than once as I recounted everything that had happened. When I was finished, Kate was silent on the other end for a long time. I'm sorry to bother you with this, but I just don't know what to do. And I want to make sure Thomas is okay, and I'm scared for him, and I'm angry at Ethel, and I'm angry at myself. But I also feel, I don't know, betrayed? I know it's not his fault, Kate. I know, but it just hurts so bad, and before I could continue, I was overtaken with tears.
Kirsten, I am so sorry this has happened to both of you. I don't know what to say. That was a lot to take in.
What do I do, Kate? How do I help my husband?
The best thing you can do is listen, Kirsten. Listen and nothing else. Don't ask a bunch of questions. Don't try to force him to talk about anything. Just let him know you're here for him and that you're willing to listen whenever he's ready to talk.
I may have already made that mistake. I asked a bunch of questions, and I tried prodding him to tell me more.
It's okay. Just try to let him be in control here. Let him know he doesn't have to tell you anything he's not comfortable with.
What about Ethel? I can't let her hurt him again.
Keep her away from him. Don't ever let her in your house again.
I want more, Kate. I want revenge. I want her in jail.
Unless Thomas wants to, I don't think you can do that, Kirsten. The best thing you can do is be there for him. I'll send over my therapist's number. She's accepting new clients and she specializes in this kind of thing. If there's one piece of advice you can give him, it's to seek help, whether that be a therapist or an attorney. But don't try to force him.
Okay, thanks, Kate. God, this whole thing is such a mess.
I know, sweetie. Do you want me to come over?
No, I want to make sure Thomas has his space, but thank you for the advice.
Don't thank me. Thank my therapist. If it wasn't for her, I don't think I could have even listened to that story.
I'm so proud of you, Kate, of the progress you've made.
Thanks, sweetie. And Thomas will get there too, eventually. You just have to be patient with him.
And with that, we said out goodbyes and hung up the call. I took a deep breath and waited for my husband to wake up. When he entered the kitchen, I told him everything Kate advised me to. I told him he didn't have to tell me anything and that I would just listen whenever he was ready to talk. I also told him that I thought he should see a professional.
I'll be fine. I don't need help. I'm just sorry for putting you through all this.
Don't be sorry, Thomas. It's not your fault, okay? It's not. Before he could finish his sentence, a knock came at the door. Something deep in the pit of my stomach told me not to look. But I knew if I didn't, Thomas would. So I stood and opened the door. I could have screamed the moment I saw Ethel standing at the doorway, determination set on her face. You're not allowed in this house, Ethel.
This isn't just your house. Tommy, honey, let me in, will you?
Thomas was frozen. He didn't say a word, just looked from me to his mom. Don't talk to him. You're a monster, and I will never allow you to get near my husband ever again. Do you hear me? I made to slam the door, but Ethel blocked it with her foot. She forced the door open and pulled a knife from her purse.
Now you listen to me. He is my son. He loves me. I will not allow you to stop me from seeing my only child.
If you don't leave now, I'll call the police.
I'd like to see you try.
Ethel charged at me with the knife, but Thomas swept in, shoving her away from me. She hit her head against the wall and collapsed on the ground. Thomas was shaking, his breathing rapid.
I'm sorry.
I called the police, and they picked Ethel up, shoving her in the back of a police car and driving away. I gave my statement to the officer while my husband sat on the stairs of our front porch, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders. When the police left, I sat next to him, the sun rising on the horizon. I said nothing, just letting the silence sink in. After a long moment, Thomas finally spoke.
I'm sorry.
Stop saying that, Thomas. I've told you, you have nothing to be sorry for.
I should have been honest with you from the beginning.
You're being honest with me now. That's all that matters. In fact, I should be the one who's sorry. I told Caitlin what happened. I know I shouldn't have, but she's been through something similar. I thought if anyone could understand, it would be her.
I understand.
The silence overtook us once again, each second passing by like an hour until finally, Thomas spoke again.
I think I would like that therapist's number, actually.
A weight lifted from my shoulder the moment he said it. Of course. It's been a few months since the incident. Ethel is going to be in jail for a pretty long while, and Thomas is still not doing the best. But at least he's recovering. It's slow, but he's making progress every day. I hate what happened to him, but I'm so proud of him. He means everything to me, and I'll never leave his side for as long as I live. Never. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is David, and I used to be a postman. My wife is Latrice, and she's a pharmaceutical saleswoman. It's been 3 years since I married Latrice. Our marriage has been great and steady, and full of the kind of love one could only dream of having. We've suffered some road bumps along the way. I lost my job, and Latrice has really had to step up to provide for us. But while I search for a new job, I've been taking care of everything around the house. The new routine is one we've settled into rather quickly. It seems no matter what trial we face, we can always face it together, as one. At least I thought we could until my father-in-law, Joel, came to visit. The visit seemed innocuous at first. He laughed with my wife and pretended I didn't exist, except to give me a painfully stiff handshake. But that wasn't anything abnormal. It wasn't until my wife left for work that he scowled at me. "Why aren't you getting ready for work?" I lost my job, sir." "Lost your job? And you ain't got a new one yet?" "I'm looking, but..." "So you're going to sit around the house all day and do nothing while my baby girl is going out and breadwinning for the both of you?" "Sir, it's not like that. I knew it from the beginning. I told my daughter from the beginning you weren't going to provide, and here you are, sitting at home while she has to make ends meet. I'm looking for a job, sir, and I've been taking care of everything at home while she's out for work. Well, Joel reached his finger out and dragged his finger across the table. This table seems pretty dusty. You'd better get to work then. I wanted to argue. My mind raced and my face flushed with heat. But despite my anger, Joel was right. I did have work to do around the house before I started applying for more jobs. So that's what I did. I put away the clean dishes, put on a load of laundry, put out some ground beef to thaw for dinner, and, yes, did some light dusting. All the while, Joel kept a close and judgmental eye on me, on every move I made. But once I finished the chores around the house, I sat down at the desk in my wife and I's office and began searching for jobs on my laptop. It wasn't long before my father-in-law poked his head in and asked what I was doing. I'm looking for a job, sir. It sure don't look like you're applying for no job. Joel gestured to my clothes, a pair of tattered jeans and a t-shirt that didn't quite fit my frame. It's laundry day, sir. Where's your suit? I don't need one, sir. I'm applying for jobs online. Online? Well, no wonder you can't find no job, looking on that internet. Back in my day, we dressed up in our best suit and walked right through the front door of a business with our resume. That's your problem, right there. You can't get a job staring at that screen all day. I was shocked. My father-in-law had never been my biggest fan, but he had never spoken to me like this either. I asked for my father-in-law to leave, and though he called me ungrateful and a disappointment, he left. Later that night, I washed the dishes from that night's dinner, while Latrice answered emails on her phone. I'd been thinking about what her father said all day, and I wanted to speak to her about it. But I waited until she was done with her phone to speak up. Hey, honey.
Yeah?
I need to speak with you. It's about your dad.
What about him?
He was very rude to me today. He thinks that I'm a disappointment because I don't have a job.
Did you tell him you're looking for a new one?
I did, but he wouldn't hear it. He thinks applying for jobs online is me being lazy. He wants me to put on a suit and walk into a business.
I'm so sorry, David. He's always been very old-fashioned. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that.
What if he's right?
What do you mean?
What if he's right? I lost my job. You've had to be the only source of income in our household. I feel like I've failed you, Latrice. Failed us.
David, no, you haven't failed us at all. Look, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. How would you feel about continuing what we're doing now?
You don't want me to get a job?
Of course I do, only if you want to, though. But think about it, David. My job makes enough money for both of us to live comfortably, and I've really been enjoying coming home to a house without chores. It's been a nice change of pace. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if one of us stayed home while the other went to work.
What about your dad?
Oh, don't worry about my dad. I'll take care of him. I'll have a long talk with him tomorrow about the way he's been treating you. So, what do you think? Is that something you would be interested in?
Why don't I sleep on it? I'll think about it and get back to you.
Sure, David. Just let me know.
Latrice's words kept me up all night, blinking wide-eyed at the ceiling and wondering what our future would look like without both of us contributing financially. She was right. Her job paid plenty. And since I'd lost my job, the house had never been cleaner. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing to keep going the way we were. But above Latrice's voice in my head, another, much louder one haunted me. Joel's voice. It yelled at me, telling me I was a disappointment, a failure, all horrible things. That morning, Latrice and I shared a goodbye kiss, and she went off for work while I stayed, maintaining the house, running errands, and applying for jobs. The day had been quiet, but then a knock sounded at the door. It was Joel. He was furious, yelling at me for asking him to leave the day before. You ought to know better than to treat your elders like that, boy. Yes, sir. Now come here. I got something to show you. Joel led me to his car, full of blankets and old food wrappers. There was also an old, musty suit laid across the back seat. He grabbed it and tossed it at me. I barely caught it in time. Now you're gonna put that suit on, take your resume, and go down to that cleaning service down the road and ask for a job since you like cleaning so much. What? Joel, what are you talking about? You heard me, boy, and don't come back to this house until you have a job. I don't care if you have to go door to door asking to clean people's houses. You don't come back to this house until I know you can provide for my daughter. I could only watch with the suit clenched in my hands as Joel ran into my house. I tried to follow him, but he shut and locked the door. I banged on the door and yelled for him to let me in, but he refused. His face appeared in the window. You heard me, boy. Don't come back to this house until you got a job. You mean my house? You mean my daughter's house? I tried to grab my phone, but it wasn't in either of my pockets. I had left it inside the house. There was no way for me to contact Latrice. I had been kicked out of my own house by my own father-in-law. I was too shocked to be angry. So, with no other place to go, suit still in my hand, I walked down the street all the way to the nearest cafe, biting back the tears welling in my eyes. When I arrived at the cafe, I set the suit down on the seat next to me and placed my head in my hands. Hours passed of me, trying not to cry and hoping my wife would follow her usual routine. Thankfully, she did. She walked into the cafe at the same time she always said she did. But when her eyes locked with mine, her eyebrows furrowed and she approached me.
David?
Hey, honey.
What are you doing here? Is that my dad's suit?
Your dad kicked me out of the house.
What?
He said that if I don't get a job, I can't come back to the house.
But I spoke to him this morning. You know what? No more of this. Come on, we're headed home.
What are you going to do?
Remind my dear old father that I married you and not him.
Latrice drove us back home. I couldn't shake the guilt that she had to spend her break dealing with this instead of getting her afternoon snack and coffee. But her face was so filled with rage, and I recognized from all our years together that when she's that angry, the best thing I could do is let her do her thing. When we arrived at the house, Latrice slammed her fist against the door, demanding her father to open up. When Joel came to the door, his face was set with the same expression as my wife's. Did your husband get a job yet?
You listen to me. I am tired of you treating my husband as less than because he doesn't have a job. I don't care how things were done back in your day. Times have changed, Dad. David is looking for a job, and if he isn't, that's fine too. I told him he could stay home and handle the household chores while I work if he wanted to.
Now why would you do such a foolish thing?
It's not foolish, Dad. David and I are a team. We don't have to both work. My job makes enough money for both of us, and if David wants to stay home, he can do that. If he wants to get a job or 2 or 3, he can do that too. It's not about providing, Daddy. It's about taking care of each other. You may not approve of how we do things, but shouldn't you just be happy that David treats me right? Shouldn't you be happy that I come home, tired from work every day, to a home-cooked meal, to a clean house, to a smiling husband that's going to watch movies with me until we fall asleep together? You never did that for Mom. You went to work, then went home and went to sleep. You never spent time with her, and that's why she left.
I was stunned. I had never known this about Joel. I remembered Latrice's mom had been sad apart from Joel at our wedding, but had never thought much of it. Joel's eyes welled with tears, and his jaw set.
I'm sorry, but I did everything I could to take care of you. That's why I worked so many hours, why I couldn't spend much time with you or your mother. I did that so you would have a roof over your head, food in your stomach.
I know, Daddy, and I appreciate that. But I would have gone hungry if it meant I actually got to spend time with you when I was younger. I'm a grown-up now, Dad. I'm not going to go hungry if David doesn't have a job. My job is great. I don't need a silent provider. I need a partner. Someone who's always there for me. That's what David is.
Maybe you're right. I'm so sorry, sweetheart.
I don't want your apology, Dad, but I think you do owe one to someone else.
Joel looked me in the eyes, a tear streaming down his cheek. For the first time in years, he looked at me with something that wasn't disappointment, resentment, or anger. Instead, guilt painted his face. He offered his hand, and I took it. He shook my hand, gentle and not overly stiff.
I'm sorry, son. I guess I just don't want my daughter to be put in a bad position. I can't provide for her anymore. So when I thought that you couldn't, I was scared.
What do you mean, Dad?
I wasn't going to tell you, Latrice, honey, but I lost my job as well.
What?
And the house. I've been living out of my car the past few weeks.
Suddenly, the food wrappers and mess inside of Joel's car made sense.
Oh, Daddy. Why didn't you say anything?
I was embarrassed.
Well, why don't you stay with us? You would do that for me? After the way I treated you?
As long as you promise not to lock my husband out of the house anymore.
No, I can't stay at your house free of charge. I'll help you find a job until you get back on your feet. I can show you how to use the internet and how to make an online application. I would certainly appreciate that, David. Latrice, thank you both so much for this.
Of course, Daddy.
For the next few months, Joel stayed in the guest room of mine and Latrice's house. I showed him how to use the computer, how to build a resume online, and where to apply. Joel even offered to help out around the house every now and then. Eventually, he found a good job at a carpentry business, and soon after, managed to find his own apartment. My relationship with Joel improved over time. More and more, he smiled and joked with me, offered to take me fishing, even shared a beer with me one fateful game day. Latrice got a raise from her job, only further securing our future, and I eventually found a part-time job at a bakery to fill the days when there isn't much to do at home. Our lives are improving every day, and though it isn't always perfect, our future is brighter than it has ever been. Thanks for watching.
Hi, my name is Camilla, and I want to share with you the tale of how my father-in-law nearly forced me to get violent. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It all started back when my husband John came home extremely upset.
Hey, honey, I have some terrible news. My mom kicked my dad out of the house.
She did what? But why?
Honestly, I have no idea. She wouldn't say over the phone, but I'm really worried about him. He hasn't lived on his own for a really long time, and I don't think that he'll be able to survive.
Sadly, I had to agree with John. I had known his father-in-law for many years, and I knew that he was practically useless. The man couldn't even boil water without being told what to do. What made matters worse was that we never got along. He would always make comments about how I cooked or cleaned, and I had always tried my best to ignore him, which was why I was so shocked by what my husband asked next.
So, listen, I know that you wouldn't be thrilled by what I'm going to ask, but, do you think my father could come and live with us for a bit? At least until he can find himself a place of his own that he can afford?
Are you kidding me? Do you expect me to put up with his chauvinistic comments every day?
Please, honey. I know that he's a lot to take, but he has nowhere else to go, and I don't want him to live on the street.
I really didn't want to say yes, but I could tell that my husband desperately wanted to help his father. He knew that his father and I had never gotten along, and he was torn between wanting to be a good son and keeping the peace.
It would only be a month, maybe 2, just until we can find him something more permanent.
Against my better judgment, I agreed, and a few days later my father-in-law moved into our spare bedroom. While I knew that it would be a challenge for me to have him in the house, I was more worried about his influence on my sons. John's father, Frank, was quite a stubborn and pig-headed person. He often said inappropriate things, and I didn't want my sons to learn such behavior from him. I had no doubt that my mother-in-law had kicked him out because she had finally grown tired of his verbal abuse, but I didn't say anything as I didn't want to upset John.
So, what are you making for dinner, Camilla? Actually, I'm cooking a meatloaf for dinner tonight, Dad. You? But that's a woman's job. Don't tell me that you're going soft on me, John.
No, Frank. John and I just take turns making dinner. It's what most normal people do these days.
Well, back in my day, women knew their place and kept their husbands fed.
I bit my tongue and tried to ignore him. He was constantly saying such things, and I knew that he wasn't going to change on my account. John later came and apologized for his father's words, but it didn't matter. My husband hadn't said anything wrong, and so he had no need to apologize. Frank, on the other hand, didn't think that he had said anything wrong and didn't care if he upset anyone. Over the course of the next week, Frank left messes all over the house. There were constantly empty glasses and plates left out everywhere, along with rotting, half-eaten food. I tried to talk to him about cleaning up after himself, but he just brushed me aside. Frank, this place is starting to smell terrible. Can you please clean up after yourself?
Why should I? As the woman, that's your job. If you didn't spend so much time watching soap operas and playing on your phone, then this place wouldn't be such a mess. Why did my son have to marry someone so damn lazy?
All I could do was bite my tongue and walk away, as I knew that I wouldn't be able to say anything that would make him behave better. I was counting down the days until he finally left, although it was beginning to get harder and harder to ignore him, especially since he had started smoking inside the house. I had asked him more than once to not do so, but he kept doing it. As bad as the mess he made in the rest of the house, his room was even worse. He would leave dirty magazines and half-eaten food in piles all around on the floor. I was worried that my sons would go in there and see all of this. Frank, you need to at least keep your own room clean. And these kinds of magazines should not be left out where my young sons can see them. I don't want them exposed to such things.
It's my room, and I can do what I want. If it bothers you so much, then do your job and clean my room.
Frank, it's not just the garbage, though. Your smoking is making the whole house smell terrible. And it isn't good for my sons to be inhaling that smoke. Can you please go outside to smoke from now on? Frank grumbled something under his breath, but I just assumed that he had decided to ignore me. Later that day, though, things got so much worse. I was starting to make dinner when I heard a commotion. Running as quickly as I could to the living room, I found Frank holding my eldest son by the wrist.
You will speak to me with respect, boy.
What are you doing? Let go of him.
No, he was talking back to me, and unlike you, I won't stand for it.
I didn't do anything. All I said was that it smelled bad in here.
Enough. Let him go right now. I stomped into the middle of the living room and was about to strike my father-in-law when he let my son go. Once he was free, he ran away to hide in his room.
Why did you do that? How is he supposed to become a man like me if he never learns to respect his elders? If you don't discipline him, then he'll turn into a lazy idiot like you.
Frank, I'm warning you. Do not touch my children again or I will make you regret it.
And what is a small, pathetic woman like you going to do about it?
Trust me, Frank, you don't want to know. I glared at him and just walked away to check on my son. He was okay, but a bit shaken up. That night when my husband got home, we had a long talk about what had happened. John, we need to talk. Your father was hurting our son and he's turning the house into a pigsty. Please tell me that he will be leaving soon.
I know, I've had more than a few arguments with him myself. He promised me that he would be leaving soon, although every time that I suggest a retirement home, he keeps turning them down.
That was all that I needed to hear. It was at that moment that I knew what I needed to do. And so, I went onto my computer and did some research and waited for just the right moment. Unfortunately, I didn't have to wait long. Weeks later, I was tidying upstairs when I heard yelling. Taking a deep breath, I rushed downstairs and into the living room. My son was lying on the ground crying. His face was all red and had a large welt on it where Frank had struck him. Did you hit my son?
I told you that he needed to be disciplined. If you and John won't do it, then I will.
I warned you, Frank. A smug smile spread across Frank's face, but it was quickly chased away as I slapped him. Unfortunately, this only made Frank angrier, and he tried to slap me back, but before he could make contact with me. I quickly punched him in the chin, sending him into a daze, and then grabbed his arm and flipped him over and pinned him with his arm pulled behind his back. What Frank didn't know was that I had taken karate my entire life, and even though I was shorter and smaller than him, I easily overpowered him. Frank, I need you to relax, or I will break your arm. My son ran out of the room as I slowly let Frank stand up. Frank, I need you to listen to me. John and I have been very patient with you, but you've crossed the line today.
Do you think I'm going to let you get away with hitting me like that?
And what are you going to do? Are you going to tell people that a little woman beat you up? I stepped forwards and tried to make myself appear intimidating. Thankfully, his wounded chin made him, which caused him to step backwards. As he did, he fell into a chair. I knew that he wouldn't tell anyone, as it would hurt his pride too much to say that a smaller woman had beat him up. Frank, I found a retirement home that will take you, and you are going to move into it. I don't care if you like the place or not. Do you understand? Frank slowly nodded, and almost began to whimper as I stood and glared at him until my husband came home. When he did, I asked if he would escort Frank to the retirement home that I found for him. As soon as he left, I went and comforted my son and promised him that it would never happen again. Once my husband came back from the home, he apologized profusely, but I knew that he wasn't at fault. He was merely trying to be a good son. He had no way of knowing just how bad his father would be. The research that I had done involved looking for the worst of the retirement homes in the area. I had purposefully chosen a place that had a terrible record, and I knew that he would hate it there, but I didn't care. As far as I was concerned, he had brought this on himself. As for us, once he was gone, our family life returned to normal, although it took our sons some time to feel entirely comfortable. And it took me a long time to finally get the house completely clean. Thanks for watching.